said, my name is Halie Corbitt. I am an extension agent in Columbia County, which, in case you don't know, is in Lake City, so just about an hour north of y'all in Gainesville. I am also an accredited financial counselor. We have quite a few on within IFAS extension. So at the end, we'll give you a counseling link. If you have any questions or anything like that, you can always reach out to us. It is also on the IFAS, the same actually link she's going to give you. It's on the same page that you can go join us there. But we'll drop the link in the chat. So today I want to talk to you about your money because we want to make our money work for us, not we work for it. So let's make sure that we're doing a couple things. So first off, let's talk about our goal today. All right, our goal today is to help you become or get financial empowerment. So it means having the information, the tools that you need to manage your money, your credit, your debt, all the financial products that you need for you, because our ultimate goal is for you to be financially empowered, not for the world to financially empower you. So we're going to go over some basics, but we're going to start with just a little game that I want y'all to play along with me with. So this is the first thing, and this is an icebreaker, as if y'all haven't heard, but we like to do it because it's a good example of we're all can start in different places, but we're all trying to wind up in the same place. And everybody is an individual. However, our ultimate goal is to all be financially empowered. So we want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can in order to do that, but realize that no matter what place you're in, you can get there. So if everybody would, you should see all the flags on your screen. So you can stick your finger on your computer or whatever you want to do, but follow along as I go. Start by picking any flag which contains the color blue in it. I don't care which one. Pick any flag, contains the color blue, put your finger on it. Move your finger left or right to the nearest flag which contains some green in it. Now move up or down to the nearest flag with some yellow in it. Finally, move left or down to the nearest flag which contains green in it. Can anybody tell me which flag your finger is on? If you haven't opened your chat, everybody's answer has been Italy. Okay, so can one of you that answered me, and I don't care which one, tell me which flag you started on? And if you don't know the name of the country, it doesn't offend me. You can say the blue one with the star or anything like that. There we go. Thank you. U.S. France. Like, don't get it. None of that offends me. Just make sure. Yep, perfect. Okay, so I see a few different ones. The one with the tree. Exactly. So everybody kind of started somewhere different. Does everybody agree? But yet we all wound up in the same place. Isn't it funny how that works? Well, that's how your money should be. None of us are going to be in the exact same place. And I want you to know that today when I talk about everything that I'm talking about. But our ultimate goal is to all get you in a place that you feel financially empowered, whatever that is for you. For some people, that's going to be extreme amount of savings and knowing that everything's set aside. For some people, that's going to be knowing that they have what they need to pay all their bills and they still have fun money to play for the weekend. You know, these are all different places. And remember, it's okay to be in different places, but our ultimate goal is to wind up in that one place in the end, which on this little activity was Italy. So thank y'all for participating. Great job. All right, so let's get right into business. If I can get it to skip, there we go. So the first thing we're going to start with is your goals. Okay, why? You're probably wondering, why would she start with goals? Well, honestly, did you know you're actually 3 times more likely to complete something if you write it down? 3 times more likely to complete anything if you simply just write it down. Isn't that kind of a crazy concept? Like, I don't mean it mean, but I mean, isn't that kind of a crazy thing to think about? All you're doing is writing it down 3 times more likely. So with our money, it's the same concept. We want to make sure that we have a plan, that we have an idea, that we know where we want it to go, all of those kind of things. And most of the time we have a general idea, but if we actually make a goal that's smart, specific, measurable, action-oriented, reachable, and time-bound. Okay, the ones that get people are the time-bound and the reachable, okay? You cannot say that your specific goal is that you want to go to Paris in 2024 and you need to save $2,000. Okay, that is specific, it is measurable, and it is action oriented. However, we're halfway through 2023. Are you really going to be able to save enough money? Is it reachable in the time amount that you have in order to do it? You might be able to, but I don't think my paycheck would allow that, especially with all my other bills and everything. So those are things that you have to think about. So make sure that you're actually going for all 5 of these, your SMART pieces of your goals. Now let's talk a little bit about what actually affects our goals. So for our goals, our values. Nobody ever thought about that, did you? Your values are the people, things, and places that are important to you and actually guide all the decisions we make throughout the day. Not just our financial, but every decision you make is guided by your values. They shape your time, your energy, your money, and they influence how you view situations. So not only what you do, but how you look at it. So we're going to talk a little bit about a little game. I have the cards here in my office that I like to play with clients when they're in front of me. It is also like an online thing if you're interested, but it does cost. But this is just one of those. You can always come join me up here if you want to play it one day. It's called Money Habitudes. And I know you're probably thinking, what in the world? Well, it's literally a card game, as you see here, and you have 3 different categories. That's not me. Sometimes it depends, and that's me. Well, when you go through all these questions, and there's a bunch of questions, it's not just like 5 or 6, there's over 50 different questions, it actually gives you an idea of what your personality is like. Well, what do I mean? Well, there are actually multiple different money personalities. You have security, status, spontaneous, planning, carefree, and giving. So you are not just one of these. Let me make that clear, because your personality is never just straightforward. But you're typically multiple of these, and then you have some of all of these, but you typically have 1 to 2 that are going to be pretty dominant in this area. So when you're looking at these, it gives you an idea of how you look at your money. Well, that's going to make a huge difference on how you manage your money. Because if you're more worried about security, then that probably means you're going to want a big savings account. Well, okay, well, for that big savings account, we need to set a goal of how much we can set aside a month to make sure that we feel that security. If you're about status, then you're going to be more worried about buying the newest car or the newest set of clothes or those kind of things. If you're spontaneous, which I wish I was a little more of, then you're going to be spending it all the time. So you might need a budget even more, because you need to know how much you can really afford to spend and still be in control of your money. And we could keep going: planning, carefree, giving. Giving is another one of my favorite ones because we don't think about it, but like giving is a great thing. But some people have more giving hearts than others. So like some people will just give and give and give and give until it puts them in a bad place. Well, again, it's about finding that balance. You can still give, but know also that you have to have a budget that you have to stay within. So these are just different ways to think about it. All right, my favorite next one is wants versus needs. When I was growing up, my parents always used to tell me one hand and spit in the other and see which one fills up first. And it was always going to be the one that I spit in, okay, because the want would still be there. Well, our finances have to be handled the same way. We have wants and then we have needs. So we have to figure out which ones we're actually going to go with. Depending on your money personality, might also depend where you go on that one. Okay. So our needs are things like food, housing, transportation, clothing, those kind of things. Okay. We need them so we can get to work. We need them so we can provide the money to bring into our house. Our wants are the fancy cars and the new iPhones and the Apple Watches. And I could keep going, the new set of clothes, a brand new fancy house. Like you could go on and on. So needs are having that space. Wants could be same thing. You want that fancy house, but is it really a need or a want? You need a house, but do you need it to be so big? You have to find that balance in there. And in order for you, you have to find your personality to be able to find those balances. So don't be afraid to do that. So all this comes down to one thing: budgeting, spending plan, knowing where your money goes. I don't care what you want to call it. And most people are like, I don't need a budget. I do just fine. I have bad news for you. Whether you think you're doing just fine or not, create yourself a budget, please. Just one time. I do VITA this time of year, volunteer income tax assistance, and I do it from February to April every single year. And I talk about budgeting with all of my clients. And they all, of course, the first year were like, yeah, da, 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 da. So now some of them have budgets, which is great. And do you know what I still remind them? This time of year, I remind them to go reevaluate it. My favorite one lately has anybody been to the grocery store? Because the prices have gone up. So I have a budget, and I had budgeted a certain amount of money for my groceries. Y'all would probably faint if I told you the amount of money for my groceries, but I have 2 kids that are growing children, and it costs quite a bit of money to feed them. And I'm talking grocery store money, not eating out money, okay? So I have recently had to reevaluate my budget and change it some because food has went up, and I can't just stop feeding my family. That would be nice, but they might get a little angry. Or what is the word, hangry, when you're hungry, angry? So those aren't things that I want to do. So I had to look at my budget and say, okay, this is what I did, but now I have to adjust from somewhere else because my money coming in didn't change. My money coming in is still exactly the same, but I need more for my groceries. So these are things that you have to think about. So when we talk about budgeting, it really comes down to your income and your expenses. There are 3 different ways that you can be. You can either be perfect, which most people are not, and come in at the end of the month at a zero. Your income, your expenses, your income and your expenses are the exact same amount. If you're doing that, you're doing great. I don't know how you're doing it, but you're doing great. The other one is negative number. If you spend more than you bring in, then you're going to have a negative number. I have bad news for you. If you're in that case, eventually you're going to get into some trouble. Just so you know, it may not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, may not happen 6 months from now, but it's going to happen because you're either going to do credit card debt, or you're going to get behind on payments, or you're going to lose things. So you want to make sure that really you're not coming up with that negative number, or if you do, you make adjustments to make sure that it gets back to at least zero. The best way you can be is positive, which means you have more income than you do expenses. That's a great way to be. That little extra bit, I encourage strongly go to savings. And we'll talk about savings in a few minutes. But that extra little bit is always a good thing to have. But always make sure that you're making those adjustments. I just told you about my groceries, and I had to make my own adjustments. Kayla, it looks like you said you had to do the same thing too. Like, that's part of life, unfortunately, and we have to make sure that we balance them. So make sure you're paying attention to that. So let's talk about the pieces of your budget. Income. This is my favorite one, especially because I do taxes. So there are all different kinds of income, all different kinds of income. Okay. You can have your earned income, your W-2, your what you get every year from your salary. Some people have seasonal jobs. Some people have unpredictable. If you work at UF, I'd say ours is probably pretty predictable, but you might have a spouse who they're not. If they work in construction, heck, right now construction is pretty hot and going, but talk about in 2020, it was a little not happening, and they just couldn't get out there and do it. So that became an unpredictable income. You have the one-time things, whether it's gifts or your tax refund, that only comes once a year. So it's that one-time thing. What did you do with it? That can make a big difference to your budget. Okay. That might be your saving grace, but is that what's going to sustain you? Because you have to wait a whole nother year. And let me tell you, taxes aren't getting any better. So it could be worse off next year. So just make sure you balance that. But also remember, when we talk about things, there's gross income and then there's net income. So your gross income is what you actually make from your company or on your salary. However, it's reduced by taxes, Social Security, and any benefits that you might purchase. Okay. And that's going to be your net income. That's what you actually bring home. I like to point this out because a lot of times when we go look for loans or we look for things like that, they actually look at our gross. Okay, which is a benefit to us in some ways because it gives us more opportunity. However, it may also give us more than what we can afford in our budget. So it's also very important that you not only pay attention to what you can get, but what you can actually afford, because if not, it can put you backwards. The next piece is expenses. Again, we talked about the needs and the wants. This is where you really have to look down at it. What you must have to live is a need, and things you desire and can live without are wants. And then we also have a third category, obligations. Okay, these are debts that you owe. We all have them. We all owe somebody something somewhere. It's very hard to live in this world nowadays with absolutely no debts. So you want to make sure that those obligations are paid. So a lot of times we call these bills. But here's the thing about the bills you need to make sure you know. Know what bills you actually have, when they're due, and how much they usually are. My favorite bill on this one would be power. Does anybody else's power bill fluctuate throughout the entire year? Kate said yes. Yeah, this is actually my favorite time of year for my power bill because it's normally the most, like the last couple months are kind of, I won't say they're exactly the same, but they kind of stay kind of level. And then from now, since Easter just happened and we had our final cool off till October, it just kind of keeps going up and going up and going up and going up and going up. And it kind of makes me, whatever. Somebody said they're on a yearly plan. That's a good way to go about it too. I will say some companies offer that, some companies don't. And they do it over your average though. So do know that sometimes you could still have to pay more. So just make sure that you have an idea, even if it is a yearly plan, of how much you normally cost so that you can make sure. I'll be honest with you, with my own budget, I plan the highest amount in my budget every month. What I know my highest month, which in my house is going to be September. It's always the hottest month. I have a pool, so the pool runs more, like all of those kind of things. I planned whatever that bill is into my bills for the entire year. And I've been asked, well, this month is probably not the same. It's not, it's less. But do you know what that means? That's more to go in my savings account because I already had it in my budget to go. So those are the things that you have to think about. Also, make sure you know when your bills are due. And I like to point this out. Does anybody know that you can actually move the due date of your bills even after they're established or when you're establishing them? Y'all can answer me. I don't bite. Yeah, so some people have done it. So, okay, when we go get, or when you apply, we'll talk about power still. When you change your house to like a new house or something, you have to get onto the new power company or you've changed the address, whatever. They typically tell you this is when your power's due. April 15th, April 1st, whatever. Okay. So with that, it's true. However, did you know that you can tell them, no, I'd rather move it to this date, or I'd rather move it to this, or you can talk to them. Sometimes the difference is you may have to pay a little bit more upfront if you want to move it, but don't ever let your bills get you into trouble. Okay. So if you can afford all your bills on the first of the month, go for it. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not that great of a saver. I wouldn't have all of my paycheck from the last month to go to the next month to pay everything on the first. So mine are kind of scattered throughout the month. My power bill is one of those. They originally told me one date and I was like, that ain't gonna work. I already got another big bill on that date. We got to move. It was my mortgage. I was like, we got to move that one. You can do that. You can do the same thing when you get a car loan, your mortgage, all of those kind of things. And even afterwards, you can move them. So you just have to be willing to sometimes front that money up front. So ways to use your money are to save, to share, and to spend. So we just have to make sure that we have a balance with those. And remember, your money personality is going to greatly affect how you do that. All right. So ways to budget. We've kind of talked about the budget now. Oh, no, it's not just for credit cards. You can do all kinds of things. All right. So we're going to talk about ways to budget now. So there are so many ways. It's not even funny. I list 6 here. We could talk way more about more, but I like to kind of put them out here. So you want to make sure that you're tracking your expenses, no matter what, whether you have a full-blown budget or not. I encourage you, every year for 30 days to track all of your expenses. It is a pain in the butt. I admit it. Okay. It is a pain in the butt. And if you have a husband, or at least my husband, it's even more of a pain in the butt because trying to get him to actually bring me all of his receipts sometimes drives me crazy. Because the first thing he does when he leaves the store, crumble the receipt and throw it in a garbage can. Drives me nuts. Okay. So luckily now we have banking apps. A lot of times I can track it a little easier that way, but he also likes to spend cash sometimes. So you have to find the thing, but track for 30 days, everything you spend, bills, stopping at the coffee shop, gas station. If you're like me and have children, what you pick up in the store for them, new clothes, anything, track it all. Okay. Write everything down for 30 days, your income as well. Know how much you bring in. Then try to actually write out a budget. Try to balance it. No, a 30-day look is not exactly the same for every single month or every single person. However, a 30-day snapshot is a pretty good image of how everything is going because it should include almost all of your bills. So that's kind of more the receipt method where you actually keep up with all the receipts. You're going to bring everyone home. You're going to try to put it all in a folder. And at the end of the month, you add them all together and figure out exactly how much you've spent, put it in categories, those kind of things. That's more of a true paper kind of way of doing it. I don't have anything against that. But like I told you, if you have my husband, that one's really hard for me. Okay. The next one is the envelope method. I'm going to be honest with you. We tried this method. It was actually my favorite method, if you want the truth. We don't do it so much anymore because we have debit cards. But for the first part of our marriage, we had envelopes. There was an envelope for spending expenses, groceries, bills, all of those kind of things. And you have separate envelopes. And at the beginning of every month, you put a set amount of money in all of those envelopes. Once the envelope is empty, that's it for that budget for that month, unless you're going to borrow from another one. But remember, that's going to affect whatever that is, whether it's your bills or your spending or whatever. My husband would much rather affect his spending because he always want to make sure the bills are paid on time, but he gets a little upset when his spending money is taken away. The next one is the calendar method, where you actually put everything on a calendar. That's my way. Okay. And I know you're probably thinking I should be an app person. I'm new age, whatever. I like the paper. I color code. I do all of those kind of things, but that's my personality. So we actually have with IFAS extension, a calendar that you can use to track. And it has two different ways of tracking your spending. Y'all will have a link today that y'all will be able to access if you would like. You can write everything down, all of your expenses, all of your main stuff, all of those kind of things. The next one is transaction register. So if you're younger, you may not know what this is. Because most of us don't even write checks anymore, but it always came with your checkbooks and you write in them everything that you spend and everything you bring in. But it's nice because it's a small little thing like a checkbook would be, and you can write everything down. However, you do have to do the manual math. So same thing with calendar, envelope, receipt, they're all kind of manual. The new age ways are computer and mobile app. So computers, Excel pretty much has a download that you can do, Google Docs, same thing, where you can track your finances. Then you can create your own too. Just saying, there's another big company that has one that people pay for. Quicken Books, I think is the other one or something, where you can pay for it and it tracks everything for you. So there's so many different ways. Then you have mobile apps. Okay. These are one of my favorites. These are one of my favorites. Sorry, I saw the chat pop up, make sure it wasn't a question. These are one of my favorites because you can actually track it on your phone. I will tell you some of the banking apps have started like categorizing things and it makes it a little easier for you, but not all of them have been able to fully do it yet. So depending on your financial institution may depend on what you can do. But if you can do it in your app, remember it's easier. Remember, there's also apps that will allow you to link to your bank account so it helps track some of it for you. Just remember to always be careful with your information and make sure that if you do know, it is a safe place to go. Don't use one of these just random named ones out there, okay? Because you never know where that information is going to go, and you definitely wouldn't want your banking information out there for anybody to access. So like I told you, we have the money management calendar. We do have a digital version as well as a paper version. I'm happy to share those with you. And she actually did put in the chat the link to the digital version, which is a survey that you'll have to do first. And then also, we have the personal finance. These are a bunch of different apps. This is a sheet that I can always share with you if you would like. All these ones have been looked at for different things, whether it's tracking your money, some of them are savings. There's lots of different ones that you can do. Receipt scanner, make sure that it tracks everything there. And then of course your most common, like I said, your banking apps, they keep getting more and more advanced, which is making it a lot easier for you to finance. But remember, they may not track everything. So you want to make sure that you are. Also remember, when we scan our debit card, sometimes it takes a little while for that money to come out. Well, if you don't account for that 3-day hold on that money, you could be without money in 3 days because you overdrew. So just remember those kind of things too. All right. So now I'm going to ask if y'all to participate with me. Which method will you use? Go to menti.com and enter the code, scan the QR code. Which method are you using or will you use? What are your thoughts? Come on. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I did this to try to be more fun so y'all could actually see. All right, keep going. It still says only got 19 people. There we go. And I know there's more than that in here. I don't even know how many we're up to now. Oh, almost 100 people. So come on now. I expect big numbers here. Doesn't take you but a second. All you're doing is picking an option. Oh, nobody says transaction register so far. I figured that was a little out of date. Even though I will tell you, I have a VITA client that comes in every year and she still brings hers, and we have to write her tax refund into it every year. So it still exists. Come on now. Y'all can do better than that. But it looks like the two most common are mobile or calendar method. Not bad. Receipts for some. Envelope I found is good. I will say if you have a younger person, an envelope method is a good method to kind of teach them with, because it literally like controls their money. Like you put it in there and they have to pull from that. Or you can do it. I kind of like the envelope method. You can even do it with accounts. You could have like 2 separate accounts and have one for spending and one for bills. And then they can only pull from certain ones for certain things. So like that's another way you could kind of a digital way to do like the envelope method, but it teaches them to actually control the amount of spending that they do. All right. So now let's talk about savings. So we talked about your budget, your income, and your expenses. But we didn't really talk about savings. Savings should be part of your expenses. Did everybody hear that? Savings should be part of your expenses. You see in big bold letters where it says pay yourself first? You need to consider yourself a bill. I know that sounds silly, but you do, because your savings is important. My favorite examples of this are life happens. That's what I call them. Okay, that's why you see it real big there. You need to set aside money for that. Does anybody ever plan to have a flat tire? Anybody wake up this morning and say, on my way to work today, I'm going to have a flat tire? Probably not. I would guess not. So then you need to make sure that you have some money set aside for that, because we don't actually know when it's going to happen. Does anybody know when it's going to happen? I like somebody's response. Nope. And when it rains, it usually pours. I can't argue with that one. Okay. So for those life happens, we want to make sure that we're there. So you want to have savings for those life happen instances, but you also want to have it to meet your goals. Like we talked about the Paris example. I know not everybody's dream is to go to Paris. I don't know what your dream is. And actually my dream isn't really go to Paris anymore. Mine is actually to go do an elk hunt. So like I'm a little different, but if you don't have a goal and I'm not putting any money in there, do you ever think it's really going to happen? You also can use it to build wealth. Does anybody want to retire? I'm not saying today, but does anybody eventually want to retire? Yeah, I figured so. So you might want to start working on that wealth now, because when you retire, you're not going to make any more money. You need it for the emergencies. You need it to cover times with less income. Anybody experience 2020 and watch your income kind of change a little? If you have anybody related to you in the construction business, I guarantee that you saw some, because they were totally sent home. Or a school teacher. I mean, a lot of people were able to work remote, but not everybody. So you got to think about those kind of things. And then, of course, for peace of mind, depending on your personality, I'll be honest with you, I'm more of a security kind of person. So I like having something in my savings to know that if something were to happen, I have somewhere that I can go to get it. So make sure that you're doing it. Somebody said washing machine broke. Yep, I've been there too. And those suckers are not cheap. And going to the laundromat only lasts for so long. So thinking about that, you also want to think about your savings and the money needed by the time to save. So, people are like, well, I don't have money to save. How am I supposed to pay myself first? Do you know that $5 can make a huge difference in a year? You're thinking, I can do math, Halie. That's only $60. You're right. But in a time when you need $60, won't you be happy that it's in your savings account versus spent somewhere random, like at the fast food joint that you just ran through for $5? Actually, heck, you can't even get a meal for $5 anymore. So $10. So take that $10 once a week and put it into a savings account. You'd be amazed at what you can do within a year. All right. I have another question for y'all. What are some ways to save? This is a word cloud one. So just enter different ways. What are ways to save? Does anybody know? Nobody can answer. I have lots of examples, but I'd love to hear what y'all's are. Oh, I see people, but no words. Is it not working? Oh, I see them coming up in here. Okay, I don't know why it's not working. That makes me upset there. I'm sorry. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. Finally. All right, direct deposit. Yes, that's a huge one. Just like I said, pay yourself first. UF allows us to be able to determine what percentage we want of our money to go where. You can literally have a piece completely direct deposited into a savings account. Also, one of my favorite ones that I've heard from lots of people as I've continued to do this job is, did you know that if you set up a savings account in a different financial institution and have it direct deposited there, that's an easy way for you to have savings that you don't even realize is there and how fast it's growing because you're not ever actually touching it until you absolutely need it. And guess what? It's there for it. Your Christmas fund, that's one of my favorite too. Does anybody have a Christmas fund? Because if you don't, you really should. Because if you have children, it always costs you. And even if you don't, you buy gifts for all the other people around you. And that one's normally a big sucker punch. People put it on credit cards or they're really, really tight that month. All those kind of things. If you plan ahead, you can use it. Extra income, of course. Schedule automatic, planned, sales and coupons. How many apps are there now that can save you money? My favorite one recently has been Get Upside. Has anybody heard of that one? And I'm not recommending as UF, we can't recommend any certain brand. I just like to always make sure that that one is a new one I've heard people talking about. Get Upside. There's the it's not Spendies is the tracking your money one. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the name of the other one. My mom uses it. She scans all of her receipts. Of course, I can't fetch. That's what it is. She scans all of her receipts. I've heard of Ibotta, Receipt Pal, and they give you savings back. So those are different ones that you can use too. Remember, it's paying you back. What about your credit cards that do cash back? Anybody ever thought about that? What do you do with that cash back? Do you spend it? Do you use it for your bill? Do you put it in your savings account? There's always pre-tax deductions, cook at home, eat less fast food. Yes, fast food just keeps going up and up and up and up. Meal prepping, reduce spending. That's a great way to save some money. But remember, sometimes that's not always possible, depending on what bills you have. So just make sure that you're always thinking about different ways. If you want more, I love the money jar. If you want more, I do that too. Round up. So anytime, and some banking apps have this option where you can actually choose that every transaction you use your debit card for, they round up and put it into your savings account. And you're probably thinking, okay, that was like 33 cents. Do you know how many times you run your debit card today? That could turn into quite a bit of money very quickly without you even realizing it. Okay. So use all the things to your advantage that you can. If you can't see it, you're less likely to spend it. All right. So now let's talk about things that we already have. Debt. Okay. So debt is money you owe to any other person or business. Okay. So our debt is typically something that is reported and known, but you need to make sure that you understand your debt. Okay, so know how much you owe, know who you know how much the payments are and when the payments are. Why? Well, for one, we don't want to pay late fees. Okay, those just cost us more money that we're wasting. For another, you want to know how much you owe, because if it's a little bit amount, you might want to go ahead and pay that one off. There are different ways that you can pay things off. We can talk about, there's also resources for that in the resources that we're going to give you at the end. There's the avalanche method and the snowball method. There's different ways you can pay. I also want to make sure that you realize there's different kinds of debts, because this also affects your credit score and those kind of things. There's secured debt, and then there's unsecured debt. Okay. So secured debt means that there's an asset attached to it. Okay. So a home, a car, rent to own, when you pawn something, they have whatever it is that you just pawned. A secured credit card. Well, what's the difference between a secured and a unsecured? So a secured credit card means that they give you that money, but they also take that amount of money from you and put it in the savings account over here, so that if you don't pay your payment, they have a way to pay your payment. It's a way that a lot of people start with credit, and it's a great way to start because it starts building your credit, but it also makes sure that fallback's there just so you don't get in any trouble. All right. And then you have unsecured credit, credit cards, student loans, department store cards, medical debt. Why are these unsecured? Typically, they don't always know what you buy with the credit card. I'm not going to say you can't read on there what it is, but they still don't know. Like if it says JCPenney's, they don't know if you bought shoes or a housing appliance or new clothes or a new dress. They don't know any of that. So they don't have anything to take back from you. Student loans. Once I get my education, can they ever actually take it from me? No, I got that diploma. It's on my wall. They can't take it back. So it's an unsecured debt. Same thing goes for the other. Medical debt. They gave you a service. Now you're expected to pay for it, but they can't take it back. They can't undo your surgery. So those are things to think about. They can't undo the scan that they did of you. Those are the ways to think about it. So make sure that when you're thinking about those kind of things, that you're always working on ways to make sure that you're balancing that debt. There's also an info sheet on your debt to income. You do want to make sure that you're keeping that around 30%. Okay. The reason for that is that you want to make sure that you're not using too much of the amount, especially on those credit cards and stuff. It's harder on your home loans and auto loans and those kind of things because there's a set amount. But however, you also, if you want to go apply for a new loan and your debt to income ratio is too high, a lot of times they won't give it to you. So these are things that you want to kind of keep in balance. So always make sure your income is quite a bit higher than what your actual debts owed are. Your credit. We have different pieces, and this is my favorite thing to talk about if you want the truth. And there's a whole nother session by colleagues that I have on just credit. So I'm not going to go way into detail, but I want you to know the basics, because all of this affects your budget. All of this affects your financial goals. All of this affects the way that you handle your money. So your credit report and your credit score. So everybody talks about credit scores. My credit score is this, my credit score is that. It's very good, exceptional, it's fair, it's poor, all of these things. Okay. However, did you know that you cannot have a credit score without a credit report? Doesn't exist. Your credit report is what creates the score. So your report is what you should truly care about, because that is ultimately what is going to decide your score. So with that, you want to make sure that you're checking it. And through the end of this year, you can check it weekly from all 3 credit bureaus with no penalties to you. Okay, annualcreditreport.com is the place to go to do that. And then after, it's typically annually, so every 12 months. But this year, it can be weekly, so you have no excuse. If you haven't pulled it, go pull it. Go pull it today. You can do it digitally. Annualcreditreport.com. Don't go to the other ones. It's not going to give you your score. Go look at your report. But if everything on your report shows that you paid on time, that you haven't missed anything, it shows your name right, all those things, then that's positives, right? So that means your credit score is probably going to be a pretty good one. Oh my goodness, if you were late on all these payments, wait, I didn't pull that loan, all of these things, then you need to make sure that you're filing disputes so that you can make sure that you get that credit score in the place that you want it to be. Okay, but you're responsible for your credit. Pulling your credit does not drop your credit score. Did everybody hear me? You pulling your credit does not drop it. It's considered preventative maintenance. Kind of like when we go get our appointment for our physical for the year for health. We don't typically pay a copay, right? That's a free one. Vaccines, physical, those kind of things. Now, when we're sick, we typically pay a copay. Okay. Same thing is when you go to get a loan or have somebody pull your credit. The reason for that is they're looking at it now because you want something or you need a service. When you're pulling it yourself, you're being preventative, proactive. You're trying to make sure that things are in the right order, and they love that. So make sure that if you haven't, please go pull it. Also know your credit history can also affect your access to things such as your power company. As crazy as that seems, we talked about that earlier. They actually typically do pull your report because it tells them how often or how likely you are to pay them back. So think about those kind of things when you're doing this. So think, oh, my credit doesn't affect me. It has a huge effect on all those bills and on all that budget. So make sure that you have an idea of where you stand. All right. So bottom line for the day is, if you don't have a budget, please get one. That's the only way that you can make your money work for you. If not, your money will not be your way. Your money will run you. Okay. If you have a budget, track it for 30 days. There have been so many changes lately with our financial world. Go look at where your money's going. Make a difference so that you can make your money work for you. If you're not, then it's still going to get you behind and get you everywhere you need to be. If you need more help, if you look at it all and you're like, oh my goodness, it's just overwhelming, reach out to us for some counseling. We're more than happy to help you with that. All right. Do I have any questions? And I'll try to go to the chat now. Well, Sarah, I like what you said a lot. She said they finished paying daycare, but now she's pretending it's still an expense and putting that money away. That's a great idea. A great idea. Raise money into savings. Yep, that's another great way to save. I actually, that is one of my practices. Somebody said fetch. Yep, that's one of the new ones I knew about. Any questions?
We had a question from earlier that asked if it's safe to use apps such as Mint to bring together expenses and income.
So you have to just remember look into the app is what I'll tell you. So like on the app sheet that I showed you, a lot of those have been, or they're warranted, they've been around for a while, all those kind of things. You have to be careful with your financial data and who you're all releasing it to. Think about it that way. If it's this new app that has very few stars, those kind of things, it might not be the greatest thing to jump on. Read their information. It tells you what they're going to do with your information when you download that app. So don't be afraid to actually read it. It'll tell you if they're going to share your data, if they're going to do these kind of things. So think about it that way. I can't tell you, oh, yes, this app is completely safe. Oh, yes, this app, FDIC insured. Yep, that's a great one too. So those are things to think about too. But I know not all of them are. Credit Karma is a decent one to look at. Remember though, when it talks about your credit, they use a completely different credit scoring system. So that may not be the same credit score that you get when you actually go somewhere. So those are just always things to think about as well. The only problem, Lori, is not all the new apps are FDIC insured. And some of them are really useful. Just be careful linking everything to it is what I'll tell you. But like, I have personally used, I think it's Spendy is one of them, and I've personally used it. I think it's cool. My husband hated it. He didn't understand any piece of it. And to me, it had like a round circle. It did all the graphs for you. It put everything in categories, like all that kind of stuff. I thought it was awesome. He hated it. So you have to find the one that works for you. Any other questions? Oh, Tatiana said, what is the best way to make your savings account work for you? They don't seem to offer a lot of interest. She is correct. Our interest rates on our savings account and stuff have been very low in the last little bit. There are different ways that you can use it. The thing that I always like to remind everybody is be careful what you do. There's different accounts out there. There's money markets, there's CDs, there's all kinds of things. You just want to make sure that whatever you're doing is insured and you're realize the risk you're taking on. So money market accounts are not actually insured. So if the money gets lost, it's just kind of lost. But whereas CDs are, so that might be the way that you want to go. But then it depends on the interest rate, which might entice you. But remember, anything putting in savings, I agree. The interest rates are not great, but they are slowly going back up again. So hopefully we will see some changes with that. Mutual funds are pretty good too. They're just risky as well. You're right, Lori. There's lots of different ones that you can use. We can have that discussion. You have to analyze the risk that you want to take. A savings account, of course, is always going to be insured. But of course, like Tatiana said, you don't get as much interest, unfortunately, especially nowadays. That's awesome. That's awesome. I don't recommend any financial institution over another. You can completely choose whatever financial institution is best for you. I'll be honest with you, I actually heard about one from a client. I haven't looked it up, from a whole different state, but they were doing CDs at a 6% interest and there were no penalties for early withdrawal. And I've really wanted to actually look into it because that is a really cool CD to be able to do. Yeah, that's what I said when they told me about it. I want to say it was in Illinois. No, it was Wisconsin. Sorry, let me make sure I get the right state. But I was going to look into it because that was a really cool one. I hadn't heard it before. Most of the time, that's how they make their money on CDs, is if you take it out before, you pay a big penalty to pull them out early. Did I miss anybody else's question or anything?
Someone was asking about the financial personality test.
So it's called Money Habitudes. So online, it does cost you. But if you ever just want to come in, anything like that, I have the cards here for free. Yep. There's all kinds of different options. You just have to be able to look into them. And some savings accounts are also children's savings accounts also typically have higher interest rates, those kind of things, but there's limitations. Connie, you have to do your research into different financial institutions. All financial institutions offer a little different. I will tell you now, with everything being digital, you can pretty much find most things online. So you can go to a financial institution and find out all their interest rates pretty much on one sheet, one page. It's really nice. Yeah. So sorry, UFF extension, we cannot recommend. I've talked about a couple different brands, but if you notice, I've named a bunch of them. I can't recommend any certain thing to y'all. I have to recommend everything across the board. So I refer to them as financial institutions, but banks, credit unions, anything like that is what I mean by those. Any other questions that I missed? If I did, I apologize. Please tell me. I'm trying to scroll back through. Also, you have my contact info. You're more than welcome to email me. You want a session, you want access to the calendar, all these different things. You're more than happy to let you have them.
Anna asked, what's the best way for a 17-year-old who's trying to build credit?
Secured credit card is the easiest way to start. What they'll do is they'll typically only get it for the amount that they have saved. The bank takes that money, puts it into a separate savings account, and then they can spend it and they have to pay on it. The only way the separate savings account is used is if they absolutely can't make a payment. That's what covers them. But it starts building their credit and it gives them that knowledge and that ability. Have them set up a budget though, so they know how much they can afford, because they may only want $100 secured credit card. I know that seems silly, but it might be a way for them to learn for their weekly spending, things like that. But you want them to actually know what they bring in and what they spend so that they can keep it within that reality. A budget's the first step. Somebody else asked me, why is it weekly? It's related to the American Rescue Act or the COVID Act, whichever one you want to refer to it as, they allowed it during that time so that everybody can make sure that their credit was good. And they have continued to do it through the end of this year. It was actually supposed to end last year and even the year before, and they've extended it. I would really love if they kept extending it. I don't know if they will or not, though. But it's been great practice, and there's been a lot of people that have used it. I think that's why they keep extending it for the credit checks weekly. You can pull your credit report weekly at annualcreditreport.com from now until the end of the year from all 3 credit bureaus, which is a great way to make sure everything's going right, those kind of things. If you don't want to pull it weekly, I would recommend you at least pull it every couple months just so you can make sure that everything's correct.